Hello everyone and welcome to our webinar about leveraging data analytics to unlock your game's potential. My name is Luke Pretty. I'm the head of education at Yoda One, and I'll be your host for today's webinar. It's great to have everybody here. Let me just quickly go over the agenda right at the start. I'll do a brief overview of Yoda One, then introduce our guest expert for today. We'll then get into the discussion. I'll most likely be asking Alex questions, and he's going to give us a live demo as well. After that, we can take live questions. So please write down your questions in the Q&A, and if you want quick answers, you can also write your questions in the chat. So we'll take questions at the end. But in the meantime, if you have quick questions, put them in the chat, and someone will be there to answer them. Now, just quickly, a bit of background about Yoda One. You may know Yoda One is a game publisher, and while that's true, we are primarily a platform company. Yoda One started in 2011, publishing hit games like Crossy Road, Rodeo Stampede, Transformers Earth Wars, Ski Safari, and more. Along the way, we built a suite of internal tools that allowed for very strong monetization performance. One of these is an ad optimization platform called Maz. In 2019, we expanded to focus on helping game developers turn their games into businesses. We'll be talking more about Maz today. So let's get into it. Okay, our special guest today is Alex Olthoff. He's the Maz product manager at Yoda One and an expert of all things data analytics and monetization. Alex, thanks for doing this.
Great to be here, Luke. Thanks a lot for inviting me. I'm excited.
Yeah, I'm glad to hear it, and I'm looking forward to getting some of your insights, and also hopefully doing a bit of a tour of the Maz portal. So looking forward to that too. Maybe we could start with a little bit of a foundation, just to talk about metrics, because this is something. Would you say that it's something that especially newer developers overlook?
I'd say so, Luke. I think it comes down to just being a little bit overwhelmed or feeling like there's so much to learn, so much to do, right? And you want to get that first game out there. You want to learn what it takes to publish, what it takes to attract a small audience. So metrics become secondary, and that's a big part of the reason why we end up, a lot of developers, myself included in the beginning, ended up ignoring metrics.
Right. Well, so then what are the key metrics to be looking at if someone's going to recommit to that and start seriously tracking metrics? What are the key metrics to look at, and then what are some of the decisions that those metrics would inform?
Yeah, great question. So in the very beginning, there's three key metrics I think you want to look at. You want to look at your retention. So how many people are coming back after day one to keep playing your game? Because each player you have, at least in the free-to-play space where a lot of developers are these days on mobile, each player you have is going to be contributing on a daily basis to your revenue, to your game's traction. It impacts a lot of different variables, right? And so if your retention is going down steeply, that's a pretty good sign that there's something that you could fundamentally change about your game design, your game, to make it more appealing, to keep people for longer.
Right.
That's the first thing. And that varies by genre, but we can get into that if it's relevant. The second thing you want to look at is okay, how many people are playing? And this is tightly connected to retention, right? But you want to look at what's called daily active users. So for example, if your daily active users are sort of sitting at around 100 or 150 or 1,000, that's better, right? That's good. But it means you need to do something to catch more players to your game. It might happen organically, but there's no guarantee, right? And there are lots of small things you can do to attract more players. But the third thing, once you've got these two down, is you want to look at impressions. And why you want to look at impressions is because you want to see, okay, so I have 100 daily active users. how many of those daily active users are then going ahead and watching an ad, which is what an impression is. It's
Right.
the actual player watching an ad. And this at the very beginning are three key metrics you would need to pay attention to, because everything else is built on top of them.
Would you say for daily active users, like if I have a stable, if it's stable, how do I know, can I know from that, or should I infer from that what kind of users they are, or where they're coming from? I mean, should I be encouraged that at least my game is interesting and that there are people who are dedicated to the story and the narrative? What does that tell me?
Definitely. I mean, if you're seeing an increase in DAU day on day, right? That's a good sign that you're getting more and more people to play. So it's less an indication of the kind of players per se, and more an indication of, okay, I'm getting an increase in overall interest and commitment to my game day on day, which is really good because it means people are talking about you. Somehow you're picking up attention, and you want to look into that later. But the first thing is just to see whether or not it's trending up or trending down.
Okay. And impressions would be if I'm trying different types of ads, I'm seeing more impressions means that where I'm deciding to show ads, or if I'm showing too many, then I'm doing better or worse in that capacity.
So the way to think about impressions is that, and of course there's compound metrics, right? So you would have impressions per DAU, which in fact Yoda One provides you with, right? It's to simplify things for you. But an impression per daily DAU, or impressions per daily active user, that's going to tell you how many ads are being watched per person who's playing your game per day. And that will help you, because if that number is good and you're using a good SDK for your monetization, like Mass, then you're going to be making more money, right? But at base, you want to pay attention to those impressions as a raw number as well, because basically, if you have a certain number of DAU and your impressions are wildly different, then that's a clear indication that people are playing your game, but they're either dodging your ads, or they're never getting to your ads, or maybe they're turning the game off before they even get to an ad, and that's a bad sign. You may have retention, but you may have put your ads in such a way that players play about 2 minutes of your game and then they get off, and by that time they haven't seen a single ad. That's an indication you need to change your ad strategy.
Right. Okay. Well, that makes sense. What about actual difficulties? If I'm trying to, okay, so those are some of the key things to be looking at. If I'm committed to turning my game into a business and I want to start making data-driven decisions, based on your experience, what are some of the difficulties that most devs face when they're trying to do that?
Thanks for that question, Luke. It's really critical, because the first and biggest mistake we see is that developers look first at eCPM and revenue. Now, don't get me wrong, these are very important, right? That's the lifeblood of our business. On the other hand, the metrics we talked about before, DAU, retention, impressions, those are about the health of your game. So revenue and eCPM, that's the health of your business, no question. But in order to have a healthy business, you need to have a healthy game. So if you start with those metrics, you're missing the point, because you really have to start making sure that your game is good enough that when you get more and more users, you won't lose them, and that you'll be able to get them getting the optimal amount of impressions. Otherwise, you're thinking too far ahead, and you're missing out on the great opportunity of building a great game first and then building a business on top of it. That, I think, is the number one challenge.
Or could it not be, see, that's really interesting that you bring that up, or could it also maybe not seeing far enough ahead, where the candy is, oh, I'm making money, and I get so excited by that as a shiny object that pulls my focus away from what really matters, right? It's sort of like an investment strategy where you get lucky with one thing and then you go down that rabbit hole, and you don't really build a solid set of skills and knowledge around the thing that drives long-term health as a business?
Yeah, exactly. That's a really good way of putting it. I think that gets to the second point, right? So developers, they don't, they get caught up in this revenue and this eCPM. They don't think about retention. They don't think about DAU. That can be a trap. It can also be a trap to not be systematic and day by day focused on your metrics. So some developers will just go into the mass portal, or they might go into any portal, and they might look once a week, twice a week. It needs to be a daily thing, daily activity. And it's really worth investing time and effort in each day into thinking, how does this compare to yesterday? What does this tell me about what my players are doing? And what does this tell me about what I can do differently? And I think that gets to a third point, which is treating metrics as an isolated thing instead of part of an integrated whole of your game design and game development, right? So you want to think of metrics and connect them to the choices you're making. You want to think not so much just, oh, my DAU went up, but why did my DAU go up? Or you want to think, oh, my retention suddenly plummeted. You don't want to just think, oh, my retention plummeted. That's terrible. You want to think, oh, I wonder if that feature I just released caused my retention to go down. Or I wonder if there's some other game like mine that is competing with me right now, and I need to think about what's bringing users to them and then make adaptations in my own game. So all these things, they really come down to one thing, which is mindset. Having a long-term instead of just a short-term mindset with your games. And I think that's really critical and a big barrier for a lot of developers when they first get started.
That's a really great insight, is that it all comes down to this center, which is the way you think about where you are. Are you just a creative person who made a cool game, or are you a business owner who happens to make cool games?
That's absolutely right.
In that sense, your game is really just it's an experiment. Each one is a laboratory that's producing data day by day, which will then allow you to figure out what to do next or what to change. It's very interesting.
Yeah, it is. It's very cool too, because one of the things is, as you get better at this process, you make better games. We see it all the time with our developers. We see when they start taking metrics seriously, when they start watching and saying, hey, this XYZ thing has improved my revenue. This feature, my retention, this feature has brought in more users. Then they remember that. And the next time they build a new game, they build it in from the beginning, right? But in this day and age, if you're not paying attention to what your data is telling you about the decisions you're making day by day, week by week, you're not learning and you won't keep up. Or if you do keep up, it'll be because you got lucky, which is awesome, but you can only get lucky so many times.
Yeah, that's another good reminder. And that sort of would be also a reminder that if it's you and another person, and the other person, maybe your games are about equal, but the other person is doing those things and you're not, then who's likely to have the advantage? It's also important to remember that, this is a booming industry, and those who do it right, they're going to have a huge advantage over those just focused on the game aspect.
Absolutely right, Luke. There's 6,000 new apps going on Google Play every day. You got to watch out. If you're not paying attention to your data, somebody else will pay attention to theirs, and eventually they'll catch up with you. But with Mass and with our Mass portal, you can absolutely pay attention, and it's great because a lot of times everything you need you can figure out in the first 30 to 60 days with the game if you're paying attention to the metrics.
Well, I think that's a great then segue to jump into the Maz portal. So maybe if you wouldn't mind, give a general overview of what is Maz for those who don't know, and then I'd love to take a look at it and dive into it a bit and see what it looks like and how it works. How's that sound?
Well, awesome, Luke. Let me start with that question about what is Mass. Put it simply, Mass is an SDK that includes all of the premium ad networks that a developer could possibly want to work with, but in one package with no manual work required in order to get those networks working optimally, right? That's what's so cool about the technology. We've built an AI backend that auto-optimizes your monetization strategy based on the data that it collects, and then feeds that critical data back to you so that then you can make game design decisions without having to think about the headache of managing all of those different ad networks. And the Mass Portal, which I mentioned just a moment ago, is the technology that allows you to view your data. So that's where the AI is passing that data back to you so that you can consider it and make decisions based on what you see. So that's it in a nutshell.
That's a good nutshell. So it's sort of like one is the thing that allows you to see it, and one is the machine that's doing the work.
Exactly. Exactly.
Shall we take a look?
Sure thing. Here, let me share my screen.
Yeah.
All right. So what we've got here is the Mass Portal, and we're looking at the dashboard page, which is what every developer gets to see when they first log in. And it's really critical to note that I've specifically filtered the data. This is some demonstration data we use for videos and webinars like this one. This game that we're looking at right now is Yoda One's own Room of Doom. And again, only demonstration data here. We're looking at the past week, right? And oops, I've just clicked on eCPM here. But we've got the key metrics I mentioned earlier, which is the estimated revenue generated within the week, the impressions, the eCPM, ARPDAU, which we didn't talk about, which I'll be glad to in just a moment, impressions per DAU, and then average DAU. And as you can see, right now, Room of Doom is not getting that many DAUs. It's quite an old game, but again, this is demo data. And what we can conclude from here is also recently we did something to bring it back up a little bit, right? So it'd be worth asking, for example, what happened on August 8th, but then August 9th and 10th and 11th? What happened that DAU went up? And similarly with impressions per DAU, we can say that it's been all over the place, right? So same as we made some change on August 7th that increased the DAU, we also see a small drop in impressions per DAU. That's okay, that's normal, right? It's a cyclical process. And I would venture to say as well that because August 7th was the weekend, and now we're getting to August 8th and August 9th, and is that right? Yeah, that's right. These days' data is definitely reflecting players who are not having as long of sessions and just aren't watching as many ads. Now, with that being said, I mentioned one metric as well that we also want to include as key data. And it's not currently in the Mass Portal, but that's retention, right? So as I mentioned earlier, retention is super critical. And basically, I wanted to show you all. So the Room of Doom game manage page, which allows you to make multiple modifications, including deciding what kind of ad types you want to use, whether or not you want to turn ads on and off, and even gives you some key indicators like your AdMob ID, which we've hidden here, and your game link and the DAU you estimated. All that's on this page. But in addition, we have our retention. And we can see here that the day one retention for Rooms of Doom would be 50%, meaning 50% of players that download the game on day 0 are using it on day 1. And that's pretty awesome. That's a very good benchmark in the industry. And by day 7, we're looking at 23%, which is still very solid. If you've got 23% of people playing your game, and your game is anything other than a hardcore game with a small dedicated audience, 23% is a great retention metric. So like I said, this particular metric, we're currently in the final stages of releasing it. We expect it to be in the portal by latest the first week of September. That will be a key driver and indicator of player engagement. But even without that, you can gather a lot just by looking at these key metrics of impressions per DAU and DAU. And you can see the trends and changes that happen as a result of small changes or optimizations that you make. So that's our portal, Luke. What do you think about it?
Well, yeah, it's very cool. It seems extremely intuitive. If I could maybe just ask a couple things. So, what if I want to identify like a seasonal trend? Some games are popular during certain times. Is there a way
Mm.
for me to do that? Is it exclusively a week?
So let's say we wanted to go for a longer period of time. We want to go 3 months back.
Mm.
We could actually see our data throughout that period of time, and we would see the considerable fluctuation that's happening throughout that time. Let's see when this was. This was back in June. Now that's interesting. The kids are off school in June, right? So somewhere around the world, it's quite possible a lot of people started playing Room of Doom when they got out of class for the year. That'd be one guess I'd have. Another thing you can see actually is that there's been a relatively stable performance, relatively, since about the end of June, which is a good sign because it actually tells you about the health of your game over a period of time. There might be spikes, and again, I'd warrant this has to do with the beginning of the summer, but then things start to stabilize over time, and you start to see, okay, this is how much I can expect on a monthly basis from this game. And you can see even pre-June, this spike at the beginning, there was quite a bit of stability with just a little bit of uptick, which may not be an indicator of the long term. So the short answer to your question is yes, look, you can definitely look much farther back. You also want to consider when you look farther back, was there anything you did at that time that might have caused a sudden spike in the game? And in this case, I don't know Room of Doom too well, but I'm guessing we did a few UA campaigns at this time to get more users, and that might account as well for the spikes we're seeing here.
So if I'm using, I'm not using Maz before, and then I integrate the Maz SDK, and I mean, we see people getting more revenue after they do that. What am I going to see, and when am I going to see it in the portal, like the performance because I'm using Maz, because I'm using the SDK? Will it be just will I see mostly, okay, my eCPM is going up? What will be the indication?
So let's take two scenarios here, Luke. The first scenario would be you already have a track record from a previous monetization solution. You know, for example, that your game had a pretty stable revenue around $20 to $30 per day, right? And then you integrate Maz. Well, you should see that on a daily basis, your revenue is going up. If this is the case, and you've already done the experimentation approach we talked about earlier, well, hopefully you're making $30, $40 a day instead of 20. And that's what should be expected. That's scenario one. Scenario two, you've got a new game, you've never launched with any ad monetization tool before. Well, the first couple of months are going to be rocky, right? It may not be so straightforward. You're going to have to figure out through different decisions you make and the data that gets reflected back to you what the best approach is long term in order to make this game popular and sustainable with users. And then you'll start to see that revenue and that eCPM climb. So definitely worth considering how you're coming into Maz, as a totally new game or as a seasoned game.
That's a really good point to mention, I think. I mean, then you would go back to those three key metrics. If it's a new game, you'd go back to those three key metrics to figure out what you should do in order to grow the game itself, or make the game more popular, and see what's working and what's not. And then on the other side, if I already know how to track analytics, but it's been a pain, then Maz just makes that a lot easier and allows me to see my improved performance better.
Thank you for that, Luke. I think you just brought something key up. So one of the things we do at Yoda One, and we really strongly believe in, is that metrics shouldn't be complicated. Some portals often hide these metrics or make them difficult to see all in one view. And that over time can get a little bit tiring for the novice developer, right? In addition, they don't provide any kind of guidance for what these metrics mean or what their significance is. By contrast, at Yoda One, we do make two significant efforts to make sure that this is as easy as possible. First of all, each metric includes a small message right here, which tells you everything you need to know about what the value of the metric is. Secondly, we also provide a very useful glossary, which I'll save our users from, but definitely check out, that includes the definitions of all of these different metrics, as well as some helpful hints as to how to use them. I think this is really important and distinguishes us from other solutions, which may have a lot of bells and whistles, but lack the simple and intuitive interface that makes it easy for developers to quickly get what they need and nothing more.
Yeah, that's well said. And I've actually spent quite a bit of time talking with developers at different stages in their careers, and I hear that consistently. It's very intuitive to use, and there's a lot of stuff that you can easily find. If you're lost, you can reach out to someone, obviously, if you need help, but also a lot of stuff there that's easy to find that can guide you and teach you how it all works.
I'm happy to hear that.
Yeah, you should watch some of our developer interviews that I've done. You got to check those out.
I have. I thought you talked to more people, Luke. I know you're always chatting up a storm with our developer community, which is awesome.
Well, Alex, I appreciate you taking us through it and just giving a general overview. If I may ask, what are some of the things on the horizon? What are some of the interesting updates coming this year, and then maybe some of the plans for next year?
Well, first, Luke, I just want to say that retention data is very exciting, right? I think this is one of our key features that is really going to take the use of analytics to 110% for all of our developers, including existing mass partners who currently would leverage a third-party analytics solution. Now, there's zero reason to use anything else but the mass portal to find everything you need. So that's number one. Number two, which I think we should all be very excited for, is the idea of being able to control ad placements. So if you're a new developer who's relatively inexperienced or even has significant game development experience, but hasn't learned to leverage the full potential of both data and ad placement manipulation, ad placement analytics is going to be an amazing feature. And that's actually already out, although we'll be making it even more intuitive to use. That allows a developer, for example, if they're showing a banner or an interstitial in a given place in their game, to be able to see exactly how much revenue is being generated by that ad placement. Another key thing I think that's a little bit longer term, but definitely worth bringing up, is coming back to this learn section. So we're very proud at Yoda One to be offering the Business of Mobile Gaming course that we produced last year right here in the portal. It's very easy to click through, register, and learn not just what we talked about today, but so much more about how to make your game into a scalable business. But that's just the beginning, Luke. By the end of this year, we're expecting at least one, if not two more courses here in the portal. And we'll continue developing for our for our developers for the foreseeable future, the kind of material that's going to help them go from 0 to 1 as game businesses. And I think that's really important because here's the thing. We know at Yoda One, having been publishers, that there are so many cool games out there. But we also know that a lot of developers who build those games never get off the ground, or if they do, it's by some kind of dumb luck. We want to change that. We believe that there's so much raw talent and potential out there. And the only thing stopping a lot of people is a clear path to success. So Yoda One is very committed to developing and helping other developers identify the path or paths to success. They're going to help them succeed in the business of mobile gaming. And I'm very excited because as a product owner of this portal, I get to see that come into being and I get to see it affect developers all over the world.
Yeah, well said, Alex. And I'd second that on the education front, because that's a part of it that I'm involved in. You know, there is this unique thing about the specifically making mobile games, and that is it's in some ways a wild west. There's not a clear roadmap, but actually it doesn't really need to be that way. And there are a lot of things that you can learn, and once you learn those things, it changes everything. And so it's going to be very exciting to share some of the stuff we have coming up this year and next
Oh
year.
yeah, definitely, Luke. I'm glad you brought that up because I do want to make a quick note. I think, historically, what's been so prevalent in the industry is that there are gatekeepers, right? And there's gatekeepers or publishers. And I'm not saying this to be too conspiratorial, but they don't necessarily want to share that information. They often like to keep it locked up and find the games that they believe in, look for the key indicators that they believe are going to make a game successful. And only then do they let their secrets out. That's not what we're about. We're about openness and about promoting success for everyone, even people who might otherwise struggle and give up. Because end of day, we want to democratize the gaming ecosystem and democratize success and business in it. And I think that's important to note, because it's often something where developers have this in their mindset. I need to get a publisher. I need to get a publisher. No, you don't. With Mass and with Yoda One, it's coming at the end of this year and into 2022. We're very committed to finding alternatives that are going to help just about anybody who wants to be successful get there. So just a little plug right there, because I'm very excited for this.
Yeah, absolutely. It's very exciting. It's sort of a new paradigm shift for the mobile gaming industry, and especially for the indie game developer, who's not affiliated with, or who doesn't have a huge, gigantic studio. Well, them too, if I suppose. But the market hasn't tended to focus on helping the smaller devs really make business with their games. Well, this has been really great, Alex. Thank you, and also thanks to those watching for being patient. If you've had questions, if you have questions in the Q&A, we're going to get to those. Don't worry. Before we do that, I'd like to just mention one thing. If you would like to connect with your fellow devs, ask questions about monetization, or learn more about Maz so that you can unlock your game's revenue potential, click on the link in the chat, or you can scan the QR code as well. You can join the WhatsApp group there and do all of those things. So click on the link in the chat and get started. Now we've got some questions here. If you don't mind hanging out for a few minutes, Alex, if that's okay.
Sure.
Is that okay?
Absolutely.
If you say no, I have no idea what to do. So just sit here in stunned silence. Well,
that'd be the thing about WFA, right? Luke, you can't track me down in the office. I'm halfway around the world.
Just go to Hawaii and start calling your name, and I'm sure eventually I'd figure it out. Okay, we got one here that says it's about compatibility. This maybe is more of a specifically SDK question, but I think you know enough about it. You could take it. So, what game engines are compatible with Maz?
Thanks, Luke. That's a good one. And I also do run the SDK product team, so I think I can.
Well, there you go.
Yeah. So we started with Unity because it is a huge engine that most indie developers on mobile use. I think it's 60-70% of the market, but we realized that this wasn't enough. We have a native Android and native iOS SDK. And what that means is that anybody using any engine can integrate Maz with one of those two SDKs. However, in order to also accommodate some up-and-coming engines that we're very excited about at Yoda One, the Maz SDK is compatible with Godot game engine, which is a growing presence in the game engine market. Solar 2D, which has remained stable and continues to grow and has a fantastic community. And we have a Cordova SDK, which is highly flexible, allowing anyone whose game engine is based on JavaScript to integrate with differing levels of difficulty depending on the game engine. But in short, Luke, there's really nothing we can accommodate. If you find yourselves getting stuck in this process, we also have an amazing support team that works overtime to make sure that games don't get left out in the cold and that everybody can use masks.
Yeah, it's another one of the things I hear in my interviews, which you haven't watched.
I sure have.
Okay. But everybody says, the team. It's the team. I can message them on the weekend, and they respond immediately, and that's part of our secret sauce.
It is.
Another one here. How is the Maz portal different from other developer portals? Well, you talked about that a little bit, but maybe you could elaborate.
Yeah, so a couple of things. Now, it depends on the company, but by and large, one of the most difficult parts about using a different portal than Maz's is you're not going to intuitively know what to do. Now, there's two reasons behind this. One is that these are designed for bigger studios. And typically, the assumption is, hey, you know what? You figure it out. You have a big monetization team. You just go do it, right? And one of the reasons for that as well, by the way, is that if you're using a mediation solution, for example, I don't want to call you about too much, but Iron Source, you're going to have to figure out how to make that portal work with the portals of the other ad networks that you're using separately from Iron Source, but want to mediate through Iron Source. And that's not something to write off, especially if you're also juggling the beginnings of your game development career. Finally, I think it's worth mentioning, once you submit a game, which is a very intuitive 5-step process with Maz, you never need to do anything again in the portal if you don't want to. You're done. And that is unprecedented in the industry. Of course, we encourage you to come back and check the metrics we talked about today. But if you just plug that game in, integrate the SDK, and upload it to Google Play, you can sit back, relax, and let the money come in. And nobody else does that.
Okay, I think we can take one more. It's close to what we talked about before, but maybe you could go into a bit more detail. How easy is it to submit a game on the portal? And then the other part is, do I need to work on the portal after I implement Maz in my game?
Well, we did definitely talk about the second one, but I'll get to that because I think there's a little bit more value to be had. But about the first one, to go in more depth about game submission, there are two scenarios. Scenario one, you've got a store link, meaning your game's already live on the Google Play or Apple App Store. In that case, you just need to fill in the ad type. So for example, are you using banners? Are you using interstitials? This information we pass to our AI so that it can automatically configure all the ad networks with those ad types. And then we like to know the estimated DAU for your game. This helps not only the algorithm to work better, but it also helps our customer success team, which is another part of that secret sauce you were talking about, to be prepared to help you with different strategies to improve and grow your game. Now, let's say you don't have a link. Your game has never been live on the Google Play or Apple App Store. Well, in that case, it's almost just as short. You'll need to tell us your game name. You'll need to tell us what platform you're on. So are you on Android or are you on iOS? And then you'll need to tell us your DAU and your ad types. There you go.
Yeah,
easy as that.
Pretty straightforward, seems like.
Yeah.
I think.
Well, that's one of the things we strive for is simplicity. And that gets me to the second part of your question, right? So I want you to imagine for a minute what I just said. You plug the Mass SDK in, you submit your game, you release, you sit back on a beach, and you never look again. And you just wait for your money to come in. Well, that's good. And you can do that as long as you provide a payment method before you submit your game. Because if you don't provide a payment method, that money is just going to sit there, right? And hey, there's nothing wrong with letting money sit. But on the other hand, I know we all like to get paid. That's the first thing. The second thing that is, which is not necessary, but I think it's very valuable, is to spend some time learning from the portal. And I don't just mean looking at your metrics. I don't just mean watching our courses. If you do just those two things, you're going to be way ahead of the game. But in addition, we provide a valuable FAQ and we provide a really useful glossary, as I mentioned earlier, that's going to introduce you to a lot of terminology in one centralized place to help you consistently be thinking about how you can continue to improve your game and game business. If you do all of that, I promise you, Yoda One can take you to new heights with your games. And we'll be very happy for you to do it. But again, that beach is waiting. You can just go there.
Yeah, so it's your choice. But it all ties back to what you were saying earlier, is that it really comes down to a mindset. Are you only a creative who wants to make games, or are you a business owner who makes games? And if it's the latter, then you have to have the right mindset. And the Maz portal is a tool that facilitates that mindset. Once you have that mindset, it gives you all the information you need to grow.
Yeah. You know, I've got that beach mindset because I'm in Hawaii, Luke. But I'll tell you the truth. The developers who succeed, they do take a fine balance between relaxing and allowing their creative mind to flow, because we're in a creative industry. It's critical. And taking seriously the daily act of checking their data. If you go too far in one direction or another, you're going to go crazy, or you're just going to let a lot of money off the table, which is okay for some people, right? As you said, maybe you're just a creator. But on the other hand, if you go too deep into the analytics and you dig and you dig and you spend hours on it every day, I promise you, you're going to tear your hair out. So it's about finding that balance. I would recommend a developer spend a minimum of 30 minutes a day on the Maz portal. It doesn't have to be consecutive, right? It can be in little chunks, looking at the data, analyzing it, and thinking about the decisions they've made. And if they don't think they can get anything else out of the analytics, spend some time looking at the glossary, at the FAQ, learn a little bit more, check out our courses. Over time, just by developing this habit, and honestly, if 30 minutes is too much, 10 minutes is also really good. Just develop the habit, because that will get you where you want to go more than anything else that you can think of. Trust me on this. I've seen it work.
Yeah, I think that's the golden mean, right? I'm in New York, so we don't have that beach thing, though. It's there is a beach, but nobody goes there, and it's all hustle. You have to hustle like crazy, and you got to yell at each other, and that's just how it is.
Fair enough. Fair enough. Well,
right.
Here in Hawaii, if you did that, I think they'd kick you off the island. So
yeah, I don't know if I could make it there. I've been habituated to the grumpy New Yorker lifestyle. Yeah. Well, Alex, really, I appreciate all the insights and also the tour. Very insightful. Thanks again for that, and for answering the questions, of course. And thank you all for joining and asking great questions. If we didn't get to your question, don't worry. We're here for you. You can continue asking questions in the chat, or more importantly, you can connect with us in a group. You can reach out to us. If you want to connect with us, you can do that by joining the WhatsApp group in the chat. So check the chat. There you can connect with other devs and get useful content for monetizing your games. Yoda One is all about helping you make more money with your game, and Maz is the best way to do that. Again, click on the link to get started. We wish you all huge success with your games, and we'll see you in the next one.